Okay, well, it is 3:30 Central, actually 3:31 Central, and I want to welcome everyone who's here to the Nashville Tableau User Group, virtual number 5, August 26th. And we have Zach Geis. You know, I actually, did I pronounce your last name right? I don't think I did. Whew, lucked out, but now you all know I didn't know beforehand. One thing I want to bring up before we get started is call attention to Tableau's new forum. You may have found out about this the hard way if you've been Googling different things and trying to find answers, being directed to a page that looks like it's there, and then it's not. That's just part of the growing pains and the transition pains. But if you start here at community.tableau.com, you can search for things there and probably find what you're looking for. This is the new forum. All of the content has been migrated over, but the URLs are different, and Google hasn't quite caught up with that fact. So if you've got questions, start here. You might have to create an account, but just work through that and let us know if you have any trouble, and we'll help figure that out. Jim, did you
if you go up to the getting started drop down, there you go. Oh, just open that up. If it's your first time out here, even if you're a previous user on the old site, go to the first time here drop down, and there's a little video there that kind of walks you through what's different about it, give you an idea of how to use it, because it is a little bit different. Just to speak to what Nick was talking about, the migration of links from the old site to the new site. That's come along really pretty well. What hasn't come along is links that have been embedded in responses and migrating those to the new site. So like if I gave you an answer and I referenced a link and told you to go someplace out, like to one of Sarah's posts, you may not find it. You may have to come back in to the forum and search for Sarah Battersby, and you'd find her there.
And note too, there's 2 different videos here: navigate the forums and how to submit a new question. So again, check it out. Be sure to get started first time here. If you do sign up your first time there, it'll actually give you a tour/walkthrough that it's recommended that you follow through. Jim got a little bit when I didn't do that just now.
The next tab to it, the Get Answers, will take you directly to the place where you can post a question or respond to a question. Explore the forum is probably the place to start. Right there.
Yeah. Cool.
So, and please come out, ask your questions. You know, this is the place you get help. That's what we're there for.
Sure. So we have 2 key agenda items today. There's our special guest speaker, Zach Geis, and then shortly thereafter we'll host breakout sessions. Curious. All right. So this is handy. The way we'll do this, and hopefully you all have the authority and power to do this for yourself. Just put it in chat if not. But you can sign up for whichever one of these breakout rooms you want by going into Zoom, clicking on your profile and renaming yourself, just adding in either number 1, number 2, or number 3. And that is, you know, we'll monitor that and assign you to the right breakout room when that time comes. Keep in mind, this is kind of a Tableau doctor scenario where you come to us with the problem and we'll do our best to help you and see how it goes. But yeah, be thinking about what kind of issues you're having. Note as well that the number 3 session will be co-hosted by Zach, since this is a topic that he's familiar with and he's our special guest. So after our Q&A session, we'll go into our breakout rooms. Also, one last announcement. Our next meeting will be September 30th, very likely at the same time. Sometimes we like to change it up just to let other people who can't meet at this time also attend our sessions. So without further ado, I want to introduce Zach Geis. He is the leader of his Tableau Center of Excellence at JP Morgan Chase. He and his team deliver quality Tableau experiences across the entire firm. He's certified in desktop as well as server, and he loves speaking about the topic he's going to share with us today, Tableau Server, but also APIs and other data platforms. We have a lot of his contact creds here. If you like, I can put his Twitter in the chat. I can do that right now. And please welcome either by reaction in Zoom, through reactions. Let's see, where's the reaction? I can't react. That's frustrating. Here we go. More. Nope, I can't. Anyway, yeah, round of applause. You guys got it. So please do that and welcome Zach Geis.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Nick. All right, so let's share my screen and get started. So welcome, everybody. I appreciate you joining. Hopefully you'll find some new and interesting information from this session. I love talking about Tableau Server, like was mentioned in the profile there. But I'm not just a Tableau Server person. You know, I work with Tableau Desktop, with the other tools. I'm pretty familiar with all aspects of Tableau. I've been using it for about a decade now. So, you know, if any questions for me, anytime, I'm always happy to chat. So that said, let's move through the presentation. So like was mentioned before, I do lead the Tableau Center of Excellence at JP Morgan Chase. That means that I get to do what I really love all the time. So my job is basically just making sure that Tableau is successful at the firm. We have over 100,000 users that we support today, just with Tableau alone. We have about a dozen Tableau servers that we maintain, that we keep updated, that we patch, that we add new features, all the kind of things that go with that. So lots of different scenarios and techniques that I can talk about with you if you know, you ever have any questions for me. I am both desktop certified as a professional and Tableau server qualified as an associate. I don't have the server certified as a professional. You can only get that in person, which is very frustrating when you live in the middle of nowhere in Ohio. Now, I mentioned I'm not just a server guy. I think that's important. It's something that I always kind of push when I talk to people, is I don't feel like you have to be just one side of the coin. This is a sampling of some of the work that I've put out just with Tableau Desktop. So I like to feel like people can, you know, learn other sides of what they do. So even if you find yourself more on the spectrum of Tableau Desktop, you can definitely learn the Tableau server side, and vice versa. You know, it just takes some work and some practice, and you know, I like to shout that out there, that you know, you can be both sides of that. So this presentation, I've actually done this in a sort of format before for the Tableau Fringe Festival, and I did it in 20 minutes. So I'm really happy to have a little bit more time to go into the details. I won't be rushing, so I haven't timed it, but I think we'll be doing pretty well on 45 minutes. The way that this presentation is kind of structured is I'm going to go through just a lot of content about Tableau Server, different features that are there. If you do know a lot of this, I apologize in advance. We'll move on to the things that maybe you don't know, but it's hard to get a one-on-one sort of series for people if they do have some experience with the tool. But the way it's going to work is we'll start with some of the very simple things, like what exactly is Tableau Server? You know, how do I publish? What are some things I should know as far as content types? And then we'll move all the way into things like, you know, how should you structure your environments as far as your server architecture? How should you set up the process topology? Won't go into those too detailed, but at least give you kind of a glimmer of some of those more advanced topics with Tableau. Now, you probably know what Tableau Server is. This is just a couple bullet points about what it is. This is an oversimplification of actually what Tableau Server is, but it's really just, you know, a place to share Tableau content with others. It's URL and web accessible for others to use, and there's a lot of different security, scheduling, alerting, content options available, which we'll kind of get into as we move forward in the presentation. A lot of what I'm talking about today is highlighted as part of Tableau's Blueprint program. If you're not familiar with this, it's definitely a good read, especially if you are in sort of a practice or a center of excellence or data delivery program, anything like that. This is definitely a good thing to look into because it talks about a lot of the research that Tableau's done as far as how should you deploy Tableau, how should you support it, what are some best practices and ways to educate your consumers and users. So you'll find that kind of sprinkled throughout the presentation. I call that out in the beginning because, again, it's nice to know that there is something on Tableau side that explains all these things, not just Server, but how to really deploy Server and Tableau in general at scale. So we'll start off really the presentation with actually publishing. So this is something, again, you may know, but if you've really been focused on Tableau Desktop, you may have never published this Tableau Server before. So I'll kind of show that. So this is just the simple Tableau Superstore sample workbook that I grabbed from the front page of Tableau. I grabbed the Superstore, open that up, and I've got it available. So I'm simply just going to go up to Server, and I'm going to hit Publish Workbook. Now, if you haven't done it before, it's going to pop up and actually say, you got to sign in. I did that to save you the time from watching me do that. But then that leads to this dialog box here, which is your Publish Workbook dialog box. So if I look in here, this is going to give me a couple different things that I can set while I'm going through my publishing steps. I can identify what project, and we'll talk about projects here in a little bit, I want to publish it to, what I want to call it. I might call this the Nashville Tug. And other things, I can add tags, make it more easily searchable, define which sheets I want to publish up to Tableau, set some of those permissions on default when I go ahead through the publishing steps, embed data sources. This is good if you have a connection to an actual database where you want to either embed credentials or prompt the user, things like that. And then a couple other tabs. I want to either show my tabs or not, just changes the experience. Show selections, if I select things, should it keep that selected when I publish, and include external files. So those are any sort of shape objects, locations to Excel, things like that. So I'm good with what I've got. I'll hit publish. And pretty simple, it's just going to take this and publish it up to my Tableau environment. So while that's coming up, this is actually a Tableau online site. This is something that anybody, even yourself, can get for free just from going through and signing up for a program from Tableau. I'll get to that. I actually have a slide dedicated to that, but if you're interested in kind of repeating any of these things and just figuring out how to start using Tableau Server, and you don't have something at work that you can use, very easy to stand that up so that you can use it yourself in your own time. I use this a lot for testing API features and other things like that. It's always on the latest version if I want to test new things, so very good to have something like that. So now Tableau has published this content up to Tableau Server, and then all I need to do is click on it and access it on the web. So again, this is just the same thing that I had in Tableau Desktop. All the same features work. We got some visit tooltips. You can click through and change filters. All of that same kind of interactivity works as well. And so I'll flip back PowerPoint, go through to the next topic. There are different types of Tableau Server. What I just showed was the second option here, Tableau Online, which is essentially Tableau Server hosted by Tableau themselves as a vendor, just so you don't have to worry about all the mechanics of hosting something for yourself. This makes it easy if you don't have your own team that's technical or the resources or things like that. You can host it from Tableau, and then you're good to go. It's somewhat less customizable because you're sharing a large-scale environment with other people, and so they kind of standardize a lot of the features, but you can still get by with most of the things that you would need to do with Tableau. Traditionally, you're going to do an on-premises installation. This is, the type that I do at work. This is just Tableau Server that's locally installed, probably in a data center at your company, just so it's all on your side. You have to do the upgrades, you have to do deployments and changes, anything like that, but it's completely manageable by you and your team. Tableau Public, obviously very popular. This is just a free open version of Tableau Online where anybody can see the content that others post. You've probably seen this before, but if you haven't, just public.tableau.com, and you can see some of the content that's available. Some of those screens that I showed earlier, some of the dashboards that I've created, actually all of them, they're published out there on Tableau Public. And definitely good if you've never used that to subscribe to the visit of the day and see other things that are available. And then finally, we have Tableau in the cloud. So you've heard it, for years now. Tableau in the cloud, or cloud services are very popular, and so of course there's an option for Tableau as well. It's available in AWS and other primary companies that work with cloud services. Easy to install, easy to grow and expand and shrink based on usage and demand and things like that. So definitely something that's worth considering if you want to move to the forefront of that. Within those different Tableau server environments, there's two license models. And this is something that comes into play, very importantly, and usually at the beginning of starting to plan for Tableau servers, whether you're going to go user-based or core-based. Most companies nowadays are using the user-based model, where it's essentially you can have unlimited server resources, but you're paying for the users. So Tableau would come to me and say, okay, you have 5,000 users. You can deploy them across 10, 20, 30 servers, but you're paying for those 5,000. The advantage of that model is that you can own the growing and resources of your Tableau server cluster. So if I realize that I have less performance than I would like, or less bandwidth and resources than I would like, I can actually add a server without any extra cost. As opposed to the core-based license model, which is the users themselves are unlimited, but you're paying for how many cores of your Tableau server you're going to use. So if I want to stand up one environment that's 16 cores, and we don't really care too much about what those cores are, but if I have something that's 16 cores, I realize it's not enough, I have to pay Tableau to allow me to go up to 24 cores. But again, it allows you unlimited users. I can throw 100,000 users on there. It's not going to ever hit any licensing issues. Excuse me. The other notable item here is with core-based, you can turn on what's called the guest account. Not used as much because, like I said, user-based licenses are used the most, but it's nice to have the guest account because you can just give a link to someone. Just like in Tableau Public, it's going to work regardless of if they're licensed on the server or not. Okay. There are a lot of different content items on Tableau Server. We have all the things that I mentioned here. These are kind of the primary things. There are some other things that aren't quite as heavily used or worth noting here, but I'll go through these pretty quickly. So workbooks are the actual content themselves, just publishing from Tableau. You're familiar with this. This is your actual dashboard with all the workbook with all the dashboards and sheets and views. The data source is going to usually be shown separately in Tableau Server, whether it's embedded or published separately, so that you can see some of the information about what is actually the connection behind the scenes on Tableau and how do you kind of interact with that. There's sites. So sites you can really think of as walls between content, and these are very physical walls that you can never have any content sharing between the two different sites that you have. So if we have a site, we have a lot of content for HR, for example. They might feel, a little threatened by the fact that they're sharing the same area and space as other content. A site is a good way to just lock them into their own area. It doesn't change, anything else except for they're in their own custom area, whereas they can't share or touch anything on the other sides. These can become a bit of a monolith if you have a lot of sites. It can cause some frustration and issues with how you interact. In fact, Tableau themselves recommends to not really go the site route because it's a double-edged sword. You can't share things, but you also can't share anything. So it's something to keep in mind. Something that's a little less physical is a project. So a project is more like a folder where you can store content in projects and have them in the same location, but still use things like Active Directory groups or just regular groups to define whether somebody can actually see the content or not. Schedules just determine the refresh rates of things. So you can do a couple things with schedules. You can use these to determine when you want to refresh content, when you want subscriptions to go through, and also when you want an alert to generate based on certain threshold. Tasks are really just the individual instances of things that are running, data refreshes, alerts, things like that. And obviously users and groups are pretty self-explanatory. Groups are just a grouping of users so that you can define permissions and structure from there. And it probably makes, you know, a little bit more sense to go and flip around a little bit. So I'm back here on my Tableau Server environment, and what I said kind of aligns over here to the left. We can see our users in our groups. We can see our schedules. We see the kind of the listing of that. Users, you're just going to see me because this is my personal area. Groups, there's nothing really set up in there. But we can also see those jobs and the task and other things that we'll get into a little bit down the road. The one thing that you don't see here is sites, and that's because of the way that this personal site is set up. I am given my own personal site. You can kind of see that right here. I'm given the site of beta testing for Tableau Server. And just, you know, something to think about there. You would actually have an option or a drop-down box over here on the left that would allow you to determine the site if you did have multiple sites there. Okay, so the toolbar is also kind of unique to Tableau Server. You get a lot more options when actually working with the content itself. I'll flip back over again to the workbook that we just published. So here's an example of those projects that I mentioned. I think I just put it in default. Here's the Nashville tug, and I'll just click into that. And again, all the things work here inside of the content itself, but also we now get a toolbar up at the top where we can do some things that we couldn't do in Tableau Desktop. For example, if I clicked on Ohio, I can back out of that by just hitting undo. There's a redo. Revert is just going to reinitialize the dashboard to whatever it started with. We can refresh and pause. These are most helpful with live connections, where if I wanted to pause the data, make some changes, and then refresh it, it'll allow me to do those kind of things. Those are all kind of basic, but the right side is actually where I think it gets a little more interesting. So the right side, I can create a custom view. This is really helpful, especially if you work with users who, let's just say, you know, I'm in Columbus, Ohio, so maybe I'm interested in Ohio. And maybe, you know, there's not a lot more I can do with this, but let's just say I'm interested in Ohio. So what I can do is actually save this and say Ohio view, make it my default. I can also make it visible to others and play around some other settings. But the biggest thing is that you'll see when I leave and come back in, Tableau's going to remember that because I said I want my Ohio view first. And that's going to work the same with other users. It's going to work the same if they have 10 or 20 filters options. It's going to remember that and keep that when they log in so that they can save time and go right to what interests them the most. I'll go ahead and you know, flip this back to my original. No, that's fine. Alerts is pretty nice because this allows you to schedule something to come back to you when it happens. So if I were to click on this axis, it's kind of something you got to realize. You can click over here and, you know, find that axis that means something to you. Go up here to create, and you can define this threshold. So, you know, different people, different things that matter to them. I might say that something that matters to me is when we sell above 50,000, I might say, look at those sales and send it to myself, and maybe I'll send it to my boss. I would type their name in here, would send it to them as well, and I can create an alert. And you can see it's successfully created up there. So once a day, it's going to check and say, you know, is anything on this axis above 50,000? If so, send Zach and his boss an alert. So really nice to have that kind of customization and ability to alert on things. Relatively new as of, I think, 2019.1 version. So a nice feature there. Another much newer feature is metrics. So metrics allow you to define the different things in the dashboard that mean something to you and see them without the lens of the dashboard. So again, let's say I'm interested in Ohio. If I click this, it's actually going to give me a preview of what the Ohio sales or profit ratio is. And if I save this out, and I'll just hit save down here, it's actually going to create a area on the, if I go into explore the content and I can actually go into the metrics, you'll see that I've got the Ohio profit ratio. And this is going to stay updated without me caring about, you know, what's happening in the rest of the dashboard. You know, a better way to probably show this would be maybe something that's got a bit of a trend to it. So let's say instead I'm interested in this furniture sales. And what I can do is go up here again, I'll hit metrics. I see a little bit more data now. And this was my Nashville alert. We'll save that. We'll flip back over here. And we'll see now I've got a Nashville data alert. And this shows me some things that before I'd have to, you know, look at the dashboard, filter things in, play around with it. But very quickly I can see, I can save this URL, put it in something else, come over here and see what are the values by day, how have they changed, get the actual, you know, the flow of this and go from there. Moving forward, we've got the subscription options. A little bit more, you know, plain option where just I'm going to say I want to subscribe to this. There's different options like don't send it if it's empty, give myself a custom message, a custom title. And if I subscribe, it's just going to send it to me on that schedule. This is going to go to me as a rendered image of the dashboard in my email that's clickable as of that time. So nice to see if you want like a daily email that shows you your sales. Nice to do that. We can also edit this dashboard. That's just going into the web editing options inside of Tableau. This is, you know, an area, depending on your licensing, you can do this or not. But this allows me to do the things that I would do in desktop, you know, inside the web. So maybe what I would want to do is go into the product and say, you know, I don't want them to pick the region. I want it to always be central. And I close it out, and then I do that just because I'm a jerk. I could do that. So, you know, back out a couple of times, and this would allow me to save it, save as, things like that. We can also share this. So we can share it with people, give their name, and just basically it'll send them, you know, give them the alert. We can also copy the embed code. That's useful for, you know, embedding and other things like that. Comments, sometimes you have these on, sometimes you don't. But this is where you can actually have a conversation about things. And I can say, you know, hey, Nick, what's going on with sales? And, you know, he'll actually get that. He'll get a note that says that Nick's turned this on, or that Nick's got an alert based on, sorry, I'm seeing the question, so I'm trying to think of that at the same time. So he'll get that, and he'll actually be able to go back and forth. You can turn on, because I've seen that question, you can turn this on at the permission level. Okay, we'll go into permissions a little bit more in detail, but so long as you go into either the workbook, the view, or the project, or anything above that, you can turn that as a specific permission to add and view comments. And then finally, full screen. That's you know, probably the best of the whole set. You can do full screen dashboard. All right, so a lot there with the toolbar. You know, it's really, really useful to use that kind of stuff. Now, I mentioned a little bit about the roles in the license type and things like that. So this is, you know, very useful to know more about kind of how those licenses work. So you have 3 different license types now in Tableau. You have a license role type. You have a creator, you have an explorer, and a viewer. So a viewer, kind of going from right to left, a viewer is the lowest grade. This is usually a traditional end user that's going to just view the content. The thing that is a little bit of a gotcha with this is a viewer cannot export data. That was moved into the Explorer side. So something to keep in mind is usually you're going to want a viewer for anybody that's just using Tableau as an end user, except if they want to download the data from the Tableau workbook. That moves into Explorer, and Explorer for the most part is where you're going to do web authoring. Aside from that tricky little data download thing, Explorer fits pretty well into like a power user, somebody that should be able to do everything the viewer can do, but also go onto Tableau Server and create some content and, you know, connect to data sources and actually build on the web without using Tableau desktop. The server side is more for the creators. So, you know, server admin, a site admin, if you need those extra roles of, you know, owning the privileges and processes and settings of a Tableau environment, you're probably in the creator role, as well as if you are a Tableau desktop user that uses the creator license and or a person that can create new data connections in Tableau Server. It gets a little clunky because there's a lot of different things and nuances of how these work, but essentially the way to think of it is a viewer is just a regular user, an explorer is somebody that can create on the web, and everybody that needs more than that is going to fall into the creator role. And that flows right into permissions. So the permissions can be a little bit tricky. This is one of those things, like I said, I've been working with Tableau for almost 10 years now. They've made a lot of improvements with permissions. It's a lot easier and more user-friendly and visual than it used to be, but it still is a very tricky thing to even you know, explain. What I've done instead of explaining it through this is I brought in, this is a chart that I really like, that I think explains roles very well. It's really just a, you know, a set of whether it's allowed at a certain level or not. So if we move over here to the left, we're going to start off with, this is how permissions are set, is a capability outside of the scope of the role. And what I mean by that is if I am a viewer, there are certain things that I just can't do by default. I can't publish a workbook. That's just out of my role. So I'm denied. But if it is inside of my role, I can keep going. Now it checks if it's an admin or a project leader. So an admin, you know, automatically can do everything. A project leader can also do pretty much everything. Project leader is a set of roles that is a user type that sits outside of those actual roles, but it allows you to own your project and do things like create sub-projects, you know, change workbooks, do things like that. And that's actually the same as content owner. A content owner, if you own an object in a Tableau Server environment, you automatically can do anything you want to that content. It's just inherently applied by owning it. So if you're one of these two things, you're allowed, you're good. If you're not, we keep going. So are you denied as a user? Is there something in your actual, we go to your user role and you as a person, is there something turned off that takes it away? If so, then you're denied. If not, we keep going. Are you specifically allowed as a user? So something in your user role, somebody went in there and said, yes, this person can do it. Then you're good, you're allowed. Otherwise, we keep moving. And you notice that it says, you know, it's first check if you as a user have these roles, and then check if a group has the roles. So are you denied as a group that you're in, then you're denied. If you are allowed as a group member, then you're allowed. Otherwise, if it's none of these things, then you're automatically denied. Now, even with this grid, even with this list of, you know, the steps, it's complicated. It's tricky. This doesn't translate very well back to this. You can see a lot of the allows. You can see the turned off. You can see whether people can explore and publish and all these things. I could probably do an hour session just on permissions alone. But I would say the best thing that you can do is kind of memorize this template right here of how this works and just play around with it. The site that I mentioned that will go into how to get access with that is a really good example of how you can jump in and just play around with things. You know, set up a second user and see what happens when you change those kind of permissions. Okay, so moving forward, we also have Tableau Mobile. I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but pretty much all those things that I did on Tableau Server and a little bit more, you can do if you have the Tableau Mobile application installed on your phone as well. This is available today for iOS. It's available for Android. It's also available for BlackBerry, the BlackBerry Mobile Suite, which a lot of big companies use today. So this is useful if you want to, jump on and see kind of a dynamic experience on your phone that resolves to that size and fits there, along with some other bells and whistles. For example, there's offline data or offline views that you can do where you can take this version, turn it offline so that you just keep that offline version without it hitting back to the server, and then you can play around with it, on the plane or while you're, moving between locations. Ask Data is another nice popular feature that's available today inside of Tableau. This came out in 2019. I'll go ahead and show a little bit of that. You may have seen this. This is something that Tableau promotes a lot inside of their different showcases and sessions. I've got this sample superstore, and I can just go in here. I'll just click through, and you'll see the first thing that pops up is Ask Data. So Ask Data is actually querying the data right now because I've never opened this. I didn't do that in front of things. I don't believe in preparing for presentations. So that came up, and it's already done a little bit of some assumptions. There's some basic data analysis. It understands what these kind of things mean, and essentially this is just a natural language process that does a little bit of machine learning on top of the data that you provided in Tableau Server. So it understands the domain values of all of these different fields that we see here. And I can just start asking questions. So, I might want to say, what is the sales in Tennessee? State of, there we go. So you'll notice, there we go. It's a little slow. It actually gets faster as you use it. It's going to start learning things that you're asking for. That was the first time, so it was having a little bit of trouble to understand exactly what I wanted. But it goes through and it understands, and it starts to build a chart that I can use now. So maybe instead of state in Tennessee, I want to add them all except that, and I can play around with it. The value here is, and the reason that I like this is not so much the natural language and the way it understands things. I think that this is a more presentable format than Tableau Web Author or Tableau Desktop for an executive user. This is, very friendly for them to kind of jump in and click, and the things you would expect you can do in here. And then you can start, doing simple things like, let me see this as a map. Hey, that was pretty simple. I didn't have to go to show me. I didn't have to move things around. I just said, I know I want a map. I know I want a heat map. Okay, I want to see this now by order date. By order date. And I can start building things like that and just kind of continue to add to that. I can also embed these kind of charts if I want to play around with embedding options and other things like that. But there's a lot more to Ask Data than I'm showing here. That's kind of where I'm heading at. Tableau Prep, also another big thing that's available now with Tableau. Specifically, Conductor works on the Tableau server side where you can schedule your flows. So if you're familiar with Tableau Prep, you're just going to build a process to cleanse your data and make it more presentable for Tableau Desktop. This just allows you with the Prep Conductor to put it on the server and allow it to run. TSM is kind of the, we're getting a little bit more advanced into the server admin side. So TSM, Tableau Server Tableau Server Manager, is where you can actually do the updates of the server management side. So if I want to go in here and make certain processes run more on certain nodes in my server cluster, I can do that. I want to change the identity store and how it uses, how we do user security, I can do that. Add a new license, other things like that. And it also has a client for, if you're interested in command line, you can do that with TSM as well. So I mentioned the Prep Conductor. There are Server Manager add-ons that are worth noting if you're not familiar with this. So there's two add-ons with Tableau now. Is the Server Management add-on and the Data Management add-on. The Server Management add-on basically includes two tools. You have the Resource Monitoring tool, which is this on the left. It's very helpful to see the performance and resource utilization that's happening on the servers, and also hone that down into which workbooks are taking up the most processes and threads and things like that. It also comes with the deployment tool. So this allows you to point at one server, pull in the content and then publish it to the other. It's very good if you have a traditional like SDLC process where you have a dev, a test, and a prod, and you have some team doing the deployments for your users. That's when you would be interested in that tool. The other one, the data management add-on, also comes with two tools. You get the prep conductor that I mentioned originally, and you also have the metadata elements that are here for the Tableau server. So, excuse me one second. So this allows you to see more information on like lineage and things like that of your data right here inside of Tableau server. There is an open API behind the scenes that you can do without purchasing the add-on, but this comes with the extra notifications, the user interface elements and things like that, so you can see it right in the Tableau server experience. Tableau server also comes if you are at least a site admin with a bunch of status screens. These are useful if you want to see the things that are happening on the Tableau server. So the traffic to views, the background task, things like that. It's it's important to be able to jump in and see kind of what's going on the server without doing a lot of work. And those are built in, right into the server. You don't have to do anything extra. You can go in and see what are my extracts and have they been failing, and what is the views that are going on. And I've seen somebody ask, what is that called? It came back to my mind. This is the server, the catalog. That's what this is called on the right side. So one of those things is spaces. So moving forward, all of this data in the Tableau status screens is available in the Postgres repository. The Postgres repository is just a database that sits behind Tableau and kind of does all the work of like who should have access, what is the content, the information about that, all that kind of stuff is kind of valuable if you're interested in understanding what's available. So just a couple things you have to do as a server admin. You have to activate it. You can connect to it, and then you can publish dashboards of your own. This is a topic that I actually, again, I could speak probably hours on this because I really love this. I've spoken at Tableau Conference about this. I've spoken other venues just about this topic because I think it's great. There's just a treasure trove of information here. You can see what permissions are there, who's accessing things, which things are failing, which fields are used now. You can see all that kind of information about what's basically available to look at the metadata information on your Tableau server. There are multiple ways to render things. I always I'm never sure if I should include this or not because it's kind of just out there and obscure, but I found it really useful because not a lot of people know this unless you work with the server side, is everything when you click on a dashboard is going to render in one of two ways. It's going to render on the server side or the client side, meaning your machine. Tableau server is usually going to do a lot of the rendering if it can keep up. So it actually checks to see the complexity of a dashboard and certain things like, are you doing polygons or other more complex things? You have a lot of marks. If so, it's going to force you to load on your client side, and it's not going to do as much of the work. Client side, all the rendering performance happens locally on your machine. And so it's actually one of those useful things to add this at the end of your URL, force it to either render on the server side or render on the client side if you experience performance issues. Sometimes we go to the server admin and say, hey, this is slow. And sometimes it's because it's rendering actually on our local machine. So there's settings that you can configure to change this, change the complexity value and things like that. But this is interesting to know, especially just if you have weird formatting behavior in your Tableau server, it could be something like this. I'll kind of move a little bit faster because I think we're getting close to where I should be wrapping. So there are a lot of open source tools to Tableau. So if you jump into this, we've got LogShark. LogShark is a tool that allows you to actually perform load testing on a Tableau server. So you can impersonate load, you can send it from one machine to another just to see how fast or slow something happens when it's used at scale. It's definitely very useful if you do anything like that. TabJolt. I'm sorry, I mixed these up. I was looking at the name. TabJolt is everything that I just said. LogShark is actually when you're going to connect to a set of logs and find some information about that. Sorry for the confusion. TabJolt is all about performance testing and user simulation. LogShark is I connect to a set of logs and I find the data underneath. This is very useful if you have a lot of issues inside of Tableau Server, like it comes back with the cannot render or cannot connect, things like that. You can use this, connect to the log set, and find out more details on why, and trace that through the session and things like that. It's also very useful. This is actually the only way to be very precise about the performance of a dashboard. You can get information from other places like the status screen or building your own sort of workbooks and data connections with the Postgres environment. But this is actually precise. This actually has down to the second how fast that thing loads. And then Tabmon, this is more of a, this looks at the machine itself. This is going to tell you information that's, captured through some of the Windows performance monitoring capabilities, and show you logins and latency, and what actually is the utilization of the CPU and other things like that. And then Scout is a nice application to look at just one workbook, kind of in a very specific lens, and look at it in two different environments just to see what it's going to look like in one environment versus the other. Now, I said I'd get back to how to get your own personal.
Hey, Zach, something happened to your mic. You want to check your mic? I think you went fog yes.
And it's like it switched mics. And,
Can you hear me now?
same.
What about now?
That's better.
Okay. All right. Yep. Sorry, I don't know what happened. So as I mentioned, there is a way to get your own Tableau Server site, and I'm not going to go into this much in detail, but there is what's called the Tableau Developer Program. This is really something that I push a lot. I think this is a very nice program where you can learn more about the APIs and how to do some custom coding and things like that with Tableau. And one of the biggest benefits that you get is your own personal sandbox in Tableau Online. So that's what I've been using throughout this presentation. I won't go through these very much in detail, but you can extend Tableau. This is another area that I really like to talk about, but we'll go through these very quickly. The APIs, what you can do outside of Tableau Server-based installation. JavaScript API allows you to embed with two-way communication with another application. The REST API allows you to do programmatic functions inside of Tableau, like add users, create a group, delete content, change permissions. The extensions API allows you to create extensible code on Tableau, and allows you to use that to do things like natural language generation, or write back to database, things of that nature. A brand new one, the Analytics Extensions API, allows you to create custom calculations and connections to other data source libraries, like data science libraries like Pascal, and things that are not native to the tool. Extract and Hyper APIs allow you to both create APIs programmatically, let's say the data source isn't available natively in Tableau, and also do ETL things like incremental update and retrieval. Web data connectors allow you to connect to web data sources that aren't available natively, like a REST endpoint, a web JSON data. Build things like people have created them to connect to Facebook data, to Twitter data, to I built some to connect to NBA data, other things like that. And then the metadata API, I touched on this a little bit. This allows you to query via GraphQL Tableau Server and actually jump in and see what's being used and what are the upstream and downstream consequences of changing something. And again, rushing through this, server architecture. So not going to go too much, but this is kind of the large scale way that Tableau works as far as the different processes. We have a gateway which connects to the different main services like Viz Portal, VizQL that renders the dashboard, data server that connects to the data, and then that goes down into where's the data stored and how is that connecting, and all the way down into what I've been talking about with the repository and the file store where the files are actually located. And that leads into something like this, where you can actually adjust the different processes, move things around. The biggest things that you care about, usually, if you're not getting too into the weeds, is VizQL, which is what renders the dashboard. You don't have enough VizQL or enough memory to support a lot of VizQL. You can have slow performance. And backgrounder, this is what is doing your extracts and your jobs and your refreshes and things like that. So those are kind of the two most that you would care about as an end user. Others, definitely, there's some thoughts in there, but not worth talking about. You can also build your server so it's highly available. meaning that you can put in different data centers, put different processes in different data centers. You can build it so it's active and offline or active. You can put a load balancer on top so it distributes load. There's a lot of different options in how you want to structure your Tableau server environment. New things here, login-based license management, LBLM, is pretty new for Tableau. This allows you to connect to a central server to connect and allow users to get Tableau desktop licenses. It just takes out the noise of using a license key and things like that. We talked about metrics. You've probably seen animations. This is available on the web now where you can actually animate things as you change them. Which works into the play button in the browser. Another, great thing that we've been asking for the whole time I've been using Tableau. I also mentioned it's available in the BlackBerry, and also TabPy, the 1.0 official release just recently came out, so that it's now supported by Tableau as a Python extension for TabPy. And then the last page here is, I didn't put all the links. There's so many different things. I put the ones that I think are important, that are less easy to find. So Tableau's GitHub account has a lot of custom add-ons. If you're interested in coding, you want to see some of the things that they've built, it's all available there. I mentioned the blueprint. This goes through how to build Tableau at scale inside of a company. And then I mentioned the Tableau Data Dev program. So this is a good page, just if you want to take a screenshot, wait a second, just to get those links and come back to those later. Okay, I put questions on here, but I think the way that we're going to do it is I'm going to flip to room 3. As Nick mentioned, there's 3 different options for the rooms. I think they were in the invite for the site. I don't know if Nick, if we want to bring that back up or just want to flip over to the rooms.
Let's answer some of the questions that people put in chat. And
okay.
Then see what is left after that.
Ooh, 32 questions.
Well, 32 chats. So some things.
I like 32 questions more. That was more impressive.
I'm going to go in reverse order as I scroll through things, and if follow-up's necessary, whoever asked the question, feel free to unmute yourself. But I'll tee it up. Make this a bit more. Okay. So one is my organization uses stored procedures with date parameters. How can I set up subscriptions for specific settings? So I think that kind of question is around how can you set up subscriptions when parameters are being passed through stored procedures? And is that possible?
Yeah, it's actually, it's not something I don't do a lot of work with stored procedures. At least I haven't done it in a while. I'd be happy to connect offline. I would think it would still work. Because typically the Tableau server is going to impersonate the user that's logged in when they create that subscription. But it's one of those things I would probably have to play around a little bit with, build something on my side just to see how exactly it handles that. I don't have a great answer for that, but I'd be happy, like I said, to chat offline about that one and understand a little bit more of the mechanics.
Right, and there's another question here that in the example of content owner, the person publishing or the owner, having control, can they also control permissions?
Yeah, they should. So if you own something, you can change the permissions to allow other people. There are other things that can kind of affect that depending on like your role and things like that. And how if you publish and then somebody changes your role after you publish, but by default you should be able to change the permissions and add other people directly from the server UI.
Right, and you can also add groups, but you can't create groups unless you're an admin. So that's something I run into day after day. Is I publish the content, but if I'm not an admin, then I can't create groups. I have to get that done by an admin. Let's see. There's a question of installing fonts on server and how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, so your server is just like a machine that you would use, on anywhere else. If you install the font installer, I forget the file type. If you install it there, it's available for Tableau to server to use. So as long as the machine has access to the font, then your dashboards would then have access to that font as well.
let's see, there's, got the stored procedures. So there's file-based data sources in Tableau Server. There was talk about having to use the network share and Windows directory and having permissions to that network share. Michael, I'm not sure what your question is. I guess is there another way to do that?
Yep.
Is there a
Yeah.
way
So
file share?
basically, with Tableau now, instead of just having a server, you know how you can schedule stuff in the scheduler for Tableau Server? You can technically schedule Tableau to look at an extract or look at a CSV or look at an Excel. And so what my organization figured out is that the only reason it wasn't connecting was because our Windows authentication, it didn't know it wasn't connected to the right drive. So once we hooked it up to the right drive, we were okay, because we didn't realize that, oh, it has to be on a shared drive. And oh, it needs to know we need to actually share with the actual Tableau server, because that run as, that was the thing. So I was just curious how you did it at your organization, or if you've run into that issue. You know,
Yeah,
when
no,
you guys
I mean,
start now.
yeah. I mean, we have some connections to shared drives just like that. I mean, there's a couple gotchas. Number one is like you said, you know, the run as account needs permission just like any other user to connect to that location. Another thing that we see a lot that I'm always telling people, you know, you got to change it, is using the fully qualified path versus using a drive letter. So, you know, if I publish directly,
Oh, that's the
then,
reason.
yeah, so that's a big one as well. So if I publish it connected to my G drive, Tableau Server has no idea what G drive is. It needs to know the full qualified path or the UNC path to understand exactly what to connect to.
Oh, that's why it won't talk
Yeah.
to P, even though, okay.
Yeah. Yep.
But it will talk to H perfectly fine.
That means if it does work, then that means that the server has that same drive mapped with the same name.
Correct, because they're all in the same, they're literally inches apart. So,
Right, but it's the best practice is what Zach said, is just make the fully qualified reference. If you've got the 2 backslashes in the path, then you're on the right track.
yeah, okay, I have to get permission to do that, but yeah.
See, question more important.
One other thing on that while you're looking it up. So there is actually another gotcha, which is, if you remember when I did the publish to server, there was the include external files. In this case, you don't want to include the external files, because if you do, it's actually going to take a copy of it as opposed to keeping the linkage back to your shared drive. So that's another gotcha in there as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's all kinds of. I've written like a 2-page document for people in my company. But there's a lot of those gotchas. All right, so I think we're ready for the breakout sessions. Let me make one last check here. Looks like we've had some people sign up last second. So I'll get those. Definitely a lot of interest for server. A number of you haven't put your name or a number next to your name. So you'll stay in this main room with Gilmore and talk about whatever you like or drop off. But in the next 3 seconds, we'll all be transferred to our rooms. So thanks, Zach. It was a great session. Oh, there is one last question. Your slides. Is there a way you can share your PowerPoint with? I guess with.
Yeah, if I send them to you, Nick, do you have a way of sharing with everybody?
Yep, I do.
Yep, I can
include it
certainly
with
do that.
the video that the recording we're making now. So
Absolutely, I can do that.
We'll hope to see you September 30th if I don't see you before then.
Thanks, everybody.
Zach, I appreciate you being here. If you ever need anything, let me know.
Sounds good. Thanks, Jim.